Hello friends! It is time to figure out what books I will be reading in April. And how do I figure out my April TBR every single month? I play my TBR game, Timmies TBR. If you are new to Timmies TBR, it is my TBR game that I made based off my love of Tim Hortons coffee because I drink a lot of it and I do love my Timmies, so I made a board game out of it. Every month I play until I reach the end of the board, however many rolls it takes to reach the end of the board. Each one gives me a book, sometimes two, because if it's doubles, I have to pick two books. So the more rolls that takes, the more books I have to read in the month. Once a book goes on Timmies TBR, it cannot come off unless I read it or I DNF it. And we are actually going to talk about that because there is going to be a new rule added to rollovers this month for reasons of a book that I am now rolling over for the second time. And realistically, I need to either read it or decide not to read it. So let's chat about the rollovers and how I did last month, and then we'll get into the new month's rolls. So I have 3 rollovers this month, which means we are starting the April TBR off with 3 books without ever doing any new Timmies rolls, and that is scary. That is scary times. However, 2 of these I somewhat suspected that I would roll over when I did my March TBR. If you go back and look, there is talks of me rolling them over anyway. Like I kind of knew that was a strong possibility for 2 of these. And one is the book we need to talk about, so let's start there. Wind Witch by Susan Dennard went on my TBR in February. I didn't read it. Rolled it into March. Didn't read it. Now I'm rolling it into April. So what I have decided is that a book can only be rolled over 2 times before it becomes these books will self-destruct book. If I do not read it in that final month, which will be April, this book will need to self-destruct and be unhauled. The reason for that being that even though I really enjoyed the first book, and I really do want to continue in all theory, if I keep pushing a book off and pushing a book off and pushing a book off, it probably means that I'm not as excited to read it as I originally was. So I'm going to give myself 1 more month, knowing full well that if this does not get read in the month of April, it must be unhauled. I'm hoping that that looming threat makes me read a book because I really do not want to unhaul it unread, or just decide, yes, I do. And that's going to be a new rule for all rollovers going forward, not just for Wind Witch, but Wind Witch is the first book that is entering the Timmies these books will self-destruct era. So if I come back to you next month with this unread, we will be unhauling Wind Witch by Susan Dennard. And I know so many people love this series, and I gave the first 4 stars just in January. So like, I need to read this. And I'm hoping the new stakes in the game will help me do just that. The other 2 books that I'm rolling over are Winter's Heart by Robert Jordan. When I put this on, I still had not read Path of Daggers, which is the book right before this. And I knew that meant I would have to read 2 Wheel of Time books in the month of March. Realistically, I also knew that was probably unlikely. So we will be rolling this over and I will get to this next month, no problem. And then also, just for the summer, this is my Patreon book club book for the months of March and April. I put this on the March TBR, knowing that I might get to it in March, but like kind of hoping to wait till April anyway, so that I would read it closer to the live show. Because if I read a book too far before a live show, I will not come to the live show with any thoughts on the book because I will have forgotten most things. So with all the housekeeping out of the way, let's dive in to our first roll for the April round of Timmies TBR. Roll number 1 is a 9. Gets me to an iced coffee space and the prompt of Set in Winter. So for our first roll, we got Set in Winter, which is quite funny because last month we got Set in Summer, hence this book, and also Cold Word in the title, hence this book. So Timmies is really giving me those prompts right now, but this one is actually going to be used for a mandatory read that I have, a buddy read that I'm doing with a large group of people, and a book that I have actually kind of started during a recent try a chapter that you can go check out on my channel where I tried chapters of hockey romances. And that is Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. I need to read the first book too because I am going to be buddy reading the second book soon as well. So there's lots of reasons why I need to read this, including the fact that I was really intrigued by the chapters that I read during that video. This book originally came on my TBR because I am an icebreaker lover. I love icebreaker, and this is a hockey romance between a hockey player and a figure skater icebreaker. However, from the 2 chapters I read, I realized this is going to be a much heavier novel. In this book, we follow Reese and Sadie, and Reese is a hockey player, and he was actually injured a few months ago in a hockey game and is now trying to get back into the game. He is a college hockey player. He's entering back in, but he's having a lot of trauma around his accident, including having panic attacks. And we do see a panic attack early on in this book. I read it in the chapters I read. We also follow Sadie, who is a figure skater. And her family life is very tumultuous. Her father is an alcoholic, and she is helping to raise her 2 young brothers. And she has a lot put on her at such a very young age. And she actually meets Reese when he is like helping to give ice skating lessons to children, her brothers. She is late picking them up, and he's kind of like, why are you late? Are they your kids? He's trying to figure out what is going on in this family situation. The next day, she comes to the ice skating rink very early in the morning to practice before people are using the ice, because it's the only time she has to practice and she needs to keep her scholarship. And she sees Reese on the ice having a panic attack. And that's where we are with this story. And we follow them as they have a romance. Again, it is icebreaker-ish with the dynamics, but again, with much heavier content, with an accident coming back into the sport, panic attack and anxiety rep, an alcoholic parent. There's a lot of things going on in this book. It's a much heavier book, and I'm really intrigued to continue forth from the couple of chapters that I read. Roll number 2 is a 10. Gets us another iced coffee space, and the prompt of thriller book. Well, Timmies is really giving us some big rolls, and we love to see it because that just gets us through the board faster. But it did give me the prompt of thriller book. And I will say I don't read a ton of thrillers anymore, but my shelves do have a lot of thrillers on it. There was a time where I was a big thriller reader, and in the last few years, I've gravitated away, but I was still buying thrillers. So I do have a lot on my shelves that I would like to read and decide if I want to keep them or get rid of them. And I did read a few thrillers earlier this year as palate cleansers, and it was really nice to kind of have them between some big chunky fantasies. So this book I actually recently put on my spring TBR because it had rain on the cover. And when this prompt came up, I went, okay, let's get one of those books read that I just recently said I wanted to read this spring. And that book is Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. And I recently just filmed that spring TBR, so I just gave the synopsis of this book. And I will say the synopsis on the back really doesn't say anything, but we do follow a cold case of a missing baby that went missing 20 years ago. And that is somehow connected to an older woman now living in a nursing home and the person who is taking care of her. And they start to connect at the nursing home, and somehow secrets start coming out that may solve this cold case of this missing baby. I'm really glad that I will be diving into one of the books that I put on that spring TBR. Sometimes I find that I don't necessarily have the time to get to those extra TBRs. So the fact that I just made that TBR and I'm already getting to the books that are on it is quite exciting. Roll number 3 is another 10. Gets us a Timbit space. And the prompt of little in the title, another 10. And I have said many times that you have to roll 5 times to get around this board. I don't think you can do it in less, but there is actually a possibility now that we do it in less because the rolls have just been so big. I actually never did the math, but like I have never done it in less than 5 rolls, and truly even 5. Like when I get through in 5, I'm excited. So if we have another good roll, we might actually do this. I am really loving 2025 Timmies. Like honestly, 2025 Timmies, the new leaf Timmies has rolled this year has just been lovely. Like I have not had a bad round of Timmies yet this year. Knock on all the wood. But for the prompt, little in the title, I'm actually going to read another one of those thrillers that is sitting on my shelves, and by a thriller author that I know I love but have only read one book by. But the one book I read was one of my best books of the year in the year that I read it, and that is Jennifer Hillier's Little Secrets. I read Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier, and I was obsessed with that book. Unfortunately, after I read that, there was a time where I couldn't talk about that book, so I don't feel like I've really screamed about it from the rafters as much as I would have loved to at the time, so I'm going to scream about it now. If you want a great thriller and you haven't read Jar of Hearts, run, pick it up immediately. It's amazing. But that is how I came to own more of Jennifer Hillier's novels, and this one obviously has little in the title, so it is perfect for this prompt. So Marin and Derek are high school sweethearts, and they have a son, Sebastian, and their life is perfect until one day their son goes missing. A year later, the police stop looking. It is now a cold case. They still have not found her son. So she hires a private detective to continue the search for her child. And what the private detective finds is that her husband is actually having an affair, and they don't know what has happened to her son. And it leads her to finding out what happened and how everything is connected. Roll number 4 is an 8 and gets us to the end of the board and a mood read. How did that happen? Timmies, 4 rolls? I am shooketh, honestly shooketh. So the last spot on the board is a mood read, and I will be putting the B&K Book Club book into that spot. And I will say I'm stretching the word mood read a little bit. I am excited to read this, but it is literary fiction, and I do not really read literary fiction, so I'm a bit nervous going into this month's B&K Book Club book. Kelsey picked it. Kelsey reads a lot of literary fiction, and I know so many in our book club do, so they will enjoy this, and I may enjoy it. We will find out. That is Hold My Girl by Charlene Carr. Now, I will say, the reason that I was willing to read this was I actually did already own this, even though it was lit fic and I was nervous, but because Charlene Carr is a local author to me and I picked it up at a local book event and the bookseller was promoting this local author and I wanted to support the local author, so I did buy the book. So I did own the book. So, here we are. Also, I really liked the show Switched at Birth, if you've ever seen that. I really enjoyed that show, and the synopsis of this gave me those vibes. So again, it was the reason I was willing to take a chance on it. This one could go either way, truly. So in this book, we follow Tess and Catherine, and they both underwent IVF around the same time. Tess did not end up having a successful pregnancy from her IVF journey. And who was the other character? Catherine. Catherine did have a child named Rose. But one day they both get a call from the fertility clinic saying that their eggs were switched. And Rose is technically biologically Tess's baby. How do these two mothers navigate this? We find out throughout this book. So here is your first look at Timmy's April TBR. We only have 4 new books on the TBR. I didn't even know that was possible, but here we are. And then 3 rollovers. And again, Win Witch is a self-destruct book. So realistically, I really do need to prioritize that one. But considering most of these are romance and thrillers, I do think I might get through this TBR fairly easily. I mean, again, I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, but a lot of these books are going to read quickly. Come on back next month and find out how I did. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video and have nothing to say down in the comments, but want to let me know you are here, leave me a heart emoji for Winter's Heart, because it is the first book on this stack. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.